Let me ask you guys something. Are you tired of being the well guy? Are you tired of being told to run Dave, to run a different trace rifle, to run Cenotaph, so you have an airplane landing strip on your head for the aircrafts to land on? Are you tired of marking targets to make heavy ammo for everybody else and then be in ammo poverty yourself for the entire duration of a raid or a GM? Well, that's unfortunate, because Well's not going anywhere for a long while. But we have a different build today for Solar Warlocks that is not Well of Radiance. Today, I like to show off a Dawnblade Solar Warlock with Dawn Chorus with the recent buffs and changes to the exotic, and this being basically a Solar 3.0 season with the artifact mods and all of that. And I think this is by far the best solar build you can use on Warlocks in the game right now, if you don't include the Well of Radiance, of course. And I'm going to show you guys why it's so good. So here we go. Let's look at the kit first. Obviously, we have the Dawnblade Super Daybreak on instead of Well. And then in our abilities, you can go with either a Rift or a Phoenix Dive. Up to you, player preference, whether you want to try to use more Restoration or not. Personally, I just ended up going with Healing Rift, just because it feels better in synergy, the way I play this anyway. Jump doesn't matter, you can do whatever you want. For the melee, we use Incinerator Snap for the ignition effect on, orange bars, yellow bars, whatever, or maybe even tanky red bars in GMs. For the grenade, I went with Fusion Grenade, again, for more scorching and ignitions, but you can go for whatever grenade you like. If you want to keep like a healing nade on, just in case, because you don't want to die, that's totally fine. In aspects, we have Touch of Flame and Heat Rises. As much as I love Icarus Dash, I feel like these two are more important for this build to have. For Heat Rises, you can just eat your grenade to get a cure. But more importantly, Final Blows, while airborne, increases the duration of Heat Rises and also grants you melee energy. So that means when you use your Incinerator Snap to make something ignite and go bang, you can actually jump up, and if there's more trash mobs to shoot, you can kill those and get your melee back very quickly for more ignitions. And then Touch of Flame is basically, do you want more explosions? Yes? Well, here you go, the aspect. Touch of Flame lets us use our Fusion Nades, and then they explode twice, which means more Scorch and getting faster to ignitions. Plus, Fusion Nades do a lot of damage. Now for fragments, I'm going to have them up on screen. I do want to say that these are very up in the air. You don't have to pick exactly these four. They're not set in stone. There's some combinations you could use if you'd like to switch some out, but I found this to be the most fun to use for me, basically, other than the usual norm that you would play on, like, Sunbracers, for example. So, here we have, from left to right, Ember of Eruption. Your solar ignitions have increased area of effect, pretty straightforward. Ember of Ashes, you apply more Scorch stacks to targets when you do Scorch. Ember of Blistering, defeating targets with solar ignitions grants grenade energy, so you get more Fusion Nades back. And then Ember of Torches, powered melee attacks against combatants, make you and your nearby allies radiant for more damage. Now let's switch over to armor to talk about more explosions. So we have the star of the show, the exotic helmet, Dawn Chorus. Funny thing, the last time I used this, at least in a fun capacity, was probably Hollowed Layer GM, where you could just use Dawnblade swords to kill all of the enemies that would almost infinitely spawn after the Fanatic disappeared, and you just kept your super up the entire time. But back then, the super actually wasn't as strong damage-wise as it is now after the changes. So now, Daybreak, for example, can 2, maybe 3-shot yellow bars in GMs. That's when you're negative 25 power, and you have several swords to throw, and it's a 2 or 3-shot. I think that's actually pretty good for a roaming super, all things considered. Also, now Daybreak scorches targets on impact, so your Scorch is improved, and you gain melee energy when you hit those targets with your Scorch. So more Scorch, they stack faster, more ignitions, more explosions, boom, more things die. Now, for the helmet itself, mod-wise, I went with a Siphon mod to synergize with the whole solar synchronization, obviously. And then the other 2 slots, I went with double heavy ammo finder. We'll explain why in a second. I'm going to show you my heavy. But you could maybe opt to take one out here and put something like Power Preservation. In case you don't know what that does, when you get super final blows, you create extra orbs of powers for your allies. So if you're doing like GMs, you can get a super, then pop it, kill a bunch of stuff, and make a bunch of extra orbs for your teammates so they can get their super and cycle them in. For gloves, there's nothing really special here. It's more cooldown mods. So we have one Firepower mod just to create orbs of power when we throw our grenades. Then we have Momentum Transfer. Causing damage with a grenade reduces your melee cooldown in case you don't want to stay in the air to get your melee back. And then finally, Bolstering Detonation. You grant class ability energy when you cause damage with a grenade, which we'll be doing all the time. Your chest piece, I'm kind of just gonna skip over. You just put resist mods on whatever you're doing. Arc, Solar, Void, Concussive, etc. That just depends on the content you're doing. So we're gonna move on to boots. Now, for boots, I'm going to spoil something here. Our heavy is going to be Dragon's Breath, but we're not going to use triple Solar Surge on our boots. We're going to use one Solar Surge, and then depending on what week you're running, let's say GMs, you're going to have a different weapon in this slot. So for example, this week that I'm recording this, GMs are Stasis Surge and Solar Surge. So I'm going to put 2 Stasis mods and 1 Solar mod. The reason for this is our heavy, Dragon's Breath, while, yeah, it's a solar weapon, duh, the ignitions and the scorch damage and the lava and all of that actually doesn't count as the Solar Surge damage, so that's just on its own, so it's not really providing us a huge benefit. Yeah, you get some damage from the impact of a rocket hitting a boss, but it's not that big. Meanwhile, the other 2 slots will go to our energy weapon. In my case, let's say it's a Riptide. If it's a Strand week, you could do the Signal Fusion from Season of the Wish from the vendor at Ribbon. So you would put 1 Solar mod and then 2 either Strand or Stasis mods, or if you want to go with something else, you know, you're feeling spicy, you want to go with like Techie Force, so an Arc Fusion. So you put 2 Arc mods into this slot. That way, you're still abusing your heavy and what the build is for, but you're also getting weapon damage out of your other weapons that's not Dragon's Breath. Finally, our class item slot, we have 3 mods in here as well. First up, we have Distribution. Reduce all your ability cooldowns when using your class ability in your targets, which you can do all the time. Then we have Outreach. Reduce your melee cooldown when using your class ability, synergizing with those 2. And then finally, we have Bomber. Reduce your grenade cooldown when using your class ability. Essentially, we're just using all of our abilities and cycling between them to get them back faster for, again, more explosions. For our weapons, as I spoiled already, we're going to be using Dragon's Breath in our heavy slot. Essentially, to give you the simple explanation, Dragon's Breath, when fired, will leave a trail of lava wherever you fire it, whether it's on the floor or at a target, and then anything in that radius near that lava will start getting scorched and then explode. When they explode, they cause ignitions, and thanks to our setup with our class abilities and our fragments and aspects, we're going to be chaining Scorch into ignitions, into more ignitions, until literally everything has exploded and died around us. In our energy slot, I ended up going with Zuli's Bane, but you could go with whatever you like. Obviously, you can't use Sunshot when you're using Dragon's Breath, so I had to settle for this, but it's still a really good weapon. It has explosive payload, it has incandescent, so it'll be scorching targets non-stop. It'll be providing me my Radiant to our artifact as I keep shooting enemies, and it just does the job very well with the synergy of the build. Finally, in our last slot, the kinetic slot, I have Riptide or Scatter Signal, so Strand or Stasis, depending on the activities that I do and what burns they have, whether they have Stasis or Strand. This, again, comes into play with the artifact, which I'll look up here in a second, but that's the build to give us an extra debuff on enemies when we're at bosses. So speaking of which, let's just get into it now. First up, we have Torch, while Radiant, which you can get very, very easily through this build, whether it's through your weapons or your abilities. You do increased weapon damage to combatants affected by Strand or Stasis. So, I fire my Riptide, instantly they're slowed, which means they have a Stasis debuff. Now I'm doing more damage. Or, if you're using Strand, you could just use something like Slice. So you use your class ability and then shoot them with the Fusion Rifle with Slice and Control Burst if you have it crafted. So now they're Strand debuffed and you're doing more damage, and also you're using Control Burst to get more damage through your Fusion Rifle that way as well. As for the other stuff, let's go through it now. Flint Striker, Rapid Solar Weapon Precision Hits and Rapid Solar Weapon Final Blows grant you Radiant. So again, shooting enemies with my Zulis is a free Radiant. We have Kindling Trigger. Radiant causes solar weapons to apply Scorch to unscorched combatants. So, again, we have a new source of Scorch. Then we have Blast Radius for rockets. Rapid Final Blows with rocket launchers and grenade launchers grant armor charges. Heart of the Flame, in case you're running 3 solar people or 6 solar people, you could use this for more damage. Then Revitalizing Blast is another debuff we have, causing damage with a solar ability, weakens champions and bosses for a short duration. Under that, we have Overload Rocket, if you like to go with that, if you're doing content that has Overload Champions. Otherwise, I would go with Solo Operative in your last column for solo content. And then finally, Raise of Precision for, while Radiant, Solar Precision Final Blows cause combatants to ignite. You could, technically speaking, go with Argent Ordnance if you'd like, but with Dragon's Breath specifically, I don't think it's really worth it, given the explanation of Ignitions and Scorch doing the most damage, and that doesn't really count towards weapon surge damage, so why are you just throwing away your surges anyway when you could be using that for the Fusion Rifle? And finally, we have From Whence You Came for this particular season to do increased ability damage to taken and scorned combatants. Obviously, when you're going to be doing any content with those enemy races, like the new dungeon, for example. Oh, almost forgot. I also will include the build of this for Dim in the description below, and I'll pin it in the comments as well. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoy this build. I just wanted to try something that's not Well of Radiance, because I am so sick and tired of being just, yup, pop well, yup, trace rifle, yup, shoot boss, mark this target, give me ammo. So I ended up trying Dawnblade with Dawn Chorus, and thanks to Dragon's Breath, I was able to just blow up the entire world, even in endgame content, and it ended up being really fun. And this is probably the build I'm going to run for the rest of the season on Warlock, just because it's very fun, and I'm tired of well. If you did enjoy the video or the build, please consider subscribing today, maybe leaving a like and or comment as well. It does help the channel grow. It's much appreciated, and it helps fight that YouTube algorithm. And if you don't know what to leave as a comment, just leave Dawnblade as the comment. As always, thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys next time.